A millionaire freezes when he sees 8-year-old identical twin girls crying at his late wife's grave. Their answer leaves him pale. The autumn wind scattered golden leaves across Oakwood Cemetery as Robert Blackwood's polished Italian shoes crunched along the gravel path. At 52, his salt and pepper hair and tailored charcoal suit projected the confidence that had built his real estate empire. But today, that facade was crumbling. 5 years since Elizabeth had passed away. Their divorce had been finalized 7 years before her death, but something always pulled him back to her grave on this date. Perhaps guilt, perhaps something deeper he couldn't name. "I brought white roses," Robert whispered, approaching the elegant marble headstone. "You always said they were honest flowers." He knelt, brushing fallen leaves from the engraving. Elizabeth Ann Sinclair, beloved daughter and friend, 1975 to 2020. The word friend always struck him as inadequate, though he had no right to suggest wife remain after their bitter separation. As Robert placed the flowers against the stone, childish voices carried on the wind. He normally visited at dawn to ensure privacy, but meetings had delayed him until afternoon. Annoyed at the intrusion, he straightened his jacket and prepared to leave. That's when he saw them. 2 little girls, identical in every way, matching. Blue coats, blonde pigtails tied with ribbons, small hands clasped together. They couldn't be more than 8 years old. An elderly woman stood several yards behind them, giving them space. Something about their faces, the curve of their cheeks, the shape of their eyes, struck Robert with uncomfortable familiarity. The girls placed handmade paper flowers beside his fresh roses and spoke in perfect unison. "Happy birthday in heaven, Mummy." Robert froze, unable to move or speak. These children were at Elizabeth's grave, calling her Mommy. One of the girls noticed him first, turning with eyes that mirrored Elizabeth's, a distinctive blue-green that Robert had once claimed could see right through him. "Did you know our Mommy too?" she asked, her small voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Robert's throat constricted. Yes, I knew her. A long time ago." The second girl studied him curiously. "You're the man from Mommy's." "Pictures!" The elderly woman hurried forward, suddenly alert. "Girls, we should go." But the first girl wasn't finished. "Aunt Caroline said you didn't want us. That's why Mommy never told you about us. She said you were too busy being rich." The world tilted beneath Robert's feet. "What? What are your names?" He managed to ask, his voice barely audible. "I'm Sophie," said the first. "And this is Lily," she added, squeezing her sister's hand. "We're twins," Lily offered unnecessarily. "We turned 8 last month." 8 years, Robert calculated quickly. Elizabeth had been 3 months pregnant when he'd told her their marriage was over, when he'd walked away without a backward glance, too consumed with building his empire to salvage what they had. "She never told me," he whispered. Not to the girls, but to the wind, to Elizabeth's ghost. "Girls, come now." The elderly woman, Caroline, took their hands firmly. She glared at Robert with undisguised contempt. "I think Mr. Blackwood needs some time alone." As Caroline led them away, Sophie turned back. "We visit every Sunday. Mummy can hear us better here." Robert sank to his knees beside the grave, the truth hitting him with physical force. He had daughters, twin daughters, and the woman he'd once loved had taken that secret to her grave. Robert remained frozen beside Elizabeth's grave, long after Caroline and the twins disappeared from sight. The cemetery had emptied, leaving him alone with the crushing weight of revelation. His daughters, he had daughters. The thought repeated in his mind like a broken record, impossible yet undeniable. His phone buzzed incessantly, his assistant reminding him of the board meeting scheduled in 30 minutes. For the first time in 20 years, Robert Blackwood wouldn't be making a meeting. He texted a brief postponement and sat on a nearby bench, his legs too unsteady to support him. "Sir?" The cemetery groundskeeper approached cautiously. "We're closing soon." Robert nodded absently, then found his voice. "The woman buried here, Elizabeth Sinclair. Do you know anything about the family that visits her?" The older man's expression softened. "The little twins. Sweet girls. Their aunt brings them every Sunday without fail, rain or shine." He hesitated. "Their mother died of cancer when they were just 3. Terrible thing. Cancer. Elizabeth had died of cancer while raising their daughters alone. Robert felt physically ill. "Where do they live?" he asked. "Can't rightly say, sir, though they always walk from the east entrance, probably from Mapleton district." Robert thanked him and stumbled to his car. His driver, Jensen, knew better than to comment on his employer's ashen face. The Bentley glided through Boston's streets while Robert stared unseeing at the passing scenery. At his penthouse, Robert went straight to his home office and pulled out a locked drawer containing the few mementos he'd kept from his marriage. Among them was Elizabeth's parents' address book. Caroline had been Elizabeth's older sister. Surely she would be listed. There it was, Caroline Sinclair, now Caroline Wright, a Mapleton address. Before he could reconsider, Robert was back in the car, directing Jensen to the modest neighborhood. Across town, the contrast between his gleaming luxury vehicle and the weathered apartment buildings couldn't have been starker. The building manager pointed him to apartment 3B after Robert slipped him a $100 bill. Standing before the worn door, Robert's hand hovered over the knocker. What right did he have to disrupt their lives? But the girls' faces, Elizabeth's eyes looking back at him, compelled him forward. Caroline opened the door and froze, her expression morphing from surprise to cold fury. "How dare you come here?" she hissed, moving to close the door. Robert blocked it with his foot. "Please, Caroline, 5 minutes. You had 7 years with Elizabeth and didn't want them. You don't get 5 minutes now. I didn't know about the..." "Girls!" his voice cracked. "She never told me." Caroline laughed bitterly. "And why would she after what you said to her? I don't want children interfering with my future." "Those were your exact words, Robert. You made yourself abundantly clear." The remembered words hit him like a physical blow. He had said that during their last terrible fight. But he'd been talking about the future, not rejecting a pregnancy he knew nothing about. "Are they home?" he asked, peering past her. "They're at their piano lesson, and you're not seeing them." "They're my daughters." "No." Caroline's voice sharpened. "Biologically, perhaps, but in every way that matters, you're nothing to them." Elizabeth was both mother and father. "I have rights." "Rights!" Caroline's voice rose dangerously. "Where were those rights when Elizabeth was working 2 jobs through chemotherapy to provide for them? Where were your rights when she was deciding whether to sell her wedding ring to pay for Lily's medical treatments?" Robert stepped back, stung. "What medical treatments?" Caroline's expression flickered with something like regret. "Go home to your empire, Robert. The girls have survived this long without you. They'll continue to do so." As the door closed in his face, Robert caught a glimpse of a small living room beyond. On the wall hung a framed photograph of Elizabeth holding 2 identical newborns, her face radiant despite visible exhaustion. The door clicked shut, leaving Robert alone in the dimly lit hallway with one devastating question burning in his mind. What was wrong with Lily? Robert's chauffeur found him sitting on the steps outside Caroline's apartment building, staring into nothing. Jensen had worked for Robert long enough to recognize when his employer needed silence. The drive back to Beacon Hill passed wordlessly, Boston's evening lights blurring through the windows. In his penthouse, Robert ignored the stack of contracts awaiting his signature and poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan. The amber liquid did nothing to dull the parade of images flooding his mind. Elizabeth's face when he'd told her he wanted a divorce. The twins placing paper flowers at their mother's grave. Caroline's bitter accusations. He pulled out his phone and called the one person who might have answers. "It's nearly midnight, Robert," Marcus Harrington answered, his voice thick with sleep. As Robert's attorney for over 20 years, Marcus was accustomed to unusual hours, but even he had limits. "Did you know Elizabeth had children?" "My children." The silence on the line was answer enough. "You knew," Robert said flatly. Marcus sighed. "Elizabeth's attorney contacted me about child support 7 years ago. You were in Singapore closing the Meridian deal. And you didn't think to tell me I had daughters." Robert's voice rose dangerously. "I followed your standing instructions, Robert. You specifically said, and I quote, 'Handle Elizabeth's demands without bothering me.' I negotiated a settlement." Robert's grip tightened on the tumbler. "You paid her off. I arranged a one-time settlement with a strict non-disclosure agreement. Elizabeth refused monthly support, said she didn't want ongoing ties. She only reached out because Lily needed specialized medical care." "What's wrong with Lily?" Robert demanded, the second time he'd asked this question tonight. Another pause. "I don't know the details. The medical records were sealed as part of the agreement." Robert ended the call and hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, much like his carefully constructed reality. He moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The city he'd conquered lay spread before him. Towers bearing his company's name dotted the skyline. He'd sacrificed his marriage for this view, for the empire he'd built. He'd told himself Elizabeth would be happier without his single-minded ambition, without his unwillingness to slow down, but he'd never imagined she was carrying his children when he'd walked away. Sleep eluded him. At dawn, Robert found himself researching childhood illnesses on his laptop. Each possibility seemed worse than the last. Without specific information, his mind conjured terrifying scenarios. When his new phone rang at 7 a.m., he answered immediately, hoping for Marcus with more information. Instead, it was Caroline. "The girls have questions," she said without preamble. "I can't protect them from the truth forever, but understand this, if you're going to be in their lives, it can't be halfway. They've lost enough." "I want to meet them properly," Robert said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "Saturday, Boston Children's Museum, 10 a.m. They'll be expecting you." She hesitated. "And Robert, Lily's health is stable but fragile. Don't make promises you can't keep." The line went dead before he could respond. Robert spent the next 3 days reorganizing his empire. Board meetings were rescheduled, business trips postponed. His executive team watched in bewilderment as their famously focused CEO suddenly delegated major decisions. On Friday evening, he did something he hadn't done in years. He visited Elizabeth's old neighborhood. Their first apartment had been a small walk-up in Cambridge, near Harvard, where she'd been studying child psychology while he built his first development project. The building looked smaller than he remembered. A young couple exited laughing, reminding him of earlier, simpler times. Elizabeth had been so proud of that tiny apartment, decorating it with flea market finds and potted herbs on the windowsill. In a moment of clarity, Robert realized what he needed to do next, something that would have been unthinkable a week ago. He needed to understand the life his daughters had lived without him. The Boston Children's Museum buzzed with weekend activity as Robert arrived, 15 minutes early. He'd agonized over what to wear, eventually abandoning his usual tailored suit for khakis and a casual blue button-down. Even so, he felt conspicuous among the parents in jeans and sneakers. He spotted them immediately, 2 blonde heads bent, Together near the bubble exhibit, Caroline stood nearby, arms crossed, her posture radiating protective vigilance. Robert approached slowly, as if they might startle and disappear. "You came," Caroline acknowledged, her tone suggesting she'd half expected him to cancel. "I said I would." Robert's attention remained fixed on the girls. In daylight, their resemblance to Elizabeth was even more striking. The same delicate nose, the same expressive eyebrows. "Sophie, Lily," Caroline called softly. "Remember what we talked about? About meeting your father?" The girls turned in unison, and Robert was struck again by their perfect symmetry. They wore matching denim jumpers with different-colored shirts. Underneath, Sophie in green, Lily in purple. He wondered if this was how they distinguished themselves to the world. "Hello," he said, suddenly unsure how to address them. The word daughters felt foreign on his tongue. Sophie, he recognized her more confident stance from their cemetery encounter, stepped forward first. "Are you really our dad? Aunt Carolyn showed us your picture in Mom's album." "Yes," Robert said, kneeling to meet their eye level despite his designer pants against the sticky museum floor. "I am. And I'm very sorry I didn't know about you until now." Lily remained half hidden behind her sister. "Mom said you were busy building skyscrapers." The simple statement carried no judgment, yet it pierced Robert deeply. "I was. Too busy, it seems." "Do you still build them?" Sophie asked. "I do. Would you like to see pictures?" Sophie nodded, but Lily shook her head. Robert noticed she seemed paler than her sister, with subtle shadows beneath her eyes that Sophie didn't have. Caroline interjected, "Why don't we get some lunch? The girls have been exploring since opening, and they must be hungry." They settled in the museum cafe. Robert watched, fascinated, as the twins arranged their food in identical patterns. Sandwich cut diagonally, apple slices in a semicircle, juice box at precise right angles to the plate. "They've always done that," Caroline explained, following. His gaze. Elizabeth called it their symmetry game. Mom said we were mirror images, Sophie volunteered. "I'm right-handed and Lily's left-handed. You share a special bond," Robert said. "I've read that twins often have their own language." "We did when we were little," Lily spoke up, her voice softer than her sister's. "But we don't need it anymore. I always know what Sophie's thinking anyway." Sophie nodded emphatically, "And I can tell when Lily's heart hurts." Robert froze. "Your heart hurts." Carolyn gave Sophie a warning look, but Lily answered matter-of-factly, "I have a hole in my heart. I was born with it. Mum called it my extra love window." Robert struggled to maintain composure. "A congenital heart defect." "Does it hurt often?" Lily shrugged. "Not really. I just get tired sometimes, and I have to take medicine and see Dr. Bennett every month." She pulled up her sleeve to reveal a small medical alert bracelet. "I can't play soccer like Sophie, but I'm better at piano." "She's amazing," Sophie added loyally. "She's learning Beethoven. I can only play Heart and Soul." "Your mother played piano," Robert said softly. "She was teaching herself when we met." The twins exchanged surprised glances. "She never told us that," Sophie said. "There's probably a lot we could tell each other," Robert suggested carefully. Caroline cleared her throat. "Girls, why don't you try the climbing structure? We can see you from here." Once they ran off, Caroline's carefully maintained calm cracked. "Lily has an atrial septal defect. She had her first surgery at 2, just before Elizabeth's diagnosis. The prognosis is good, but she'll need another procedure eventually." Her eyes hardened. "The settlement covered the first surgery, but we've been saving for the next one." "I'll pay for everything," Robert said immediately. "Whatever she needs." "This isn't about money, Robert." "Then what is it about?" Caroline stared at him for a long moment. "Proving you're not the same man who told my sister that children would ruin his life." Before Robert could respond, a small cry came from the climbing structure. They both turned to see Lily sitting on a platform, looking pale and winded, while Sophie hovered worriedly. Robert was on his feet instantly, reaching the structure before Carolyn. He climbed up awkwardly in his loafers and dress shirt, drawing stares from other parents. "I just got dizzy," Lily explained as he reached her. "It happens sometimes." Without hesitation, Robert scooped her up, cradling her small body against his chest as he carefully descended. Her weight was nothing in his arms, but the responsibility felt immense. As he carried her back to the table, her head resting trustingly against his shoulder, something shifted permanently inside Robert Blackwood. This fragile child was his daughter, and he had years of absence to make up for. What he didn't see was Sophie watching the interaction with complicated emotions playing across her young face, hope mingling with something darker, something like resentment. In the weeks following their museum meeting, Robert created space in his meticulously organized life for two 8-year-old girls. He cleared his Saturday mornings, traditionally reserved for his most lucrative overseas calls, and rearranged his corner office, adding a small table with art supplies and books. His executive assistant, Miranda, watched these changes with thinly veiled concern. "The Singapore investors are demanding to know why you've pushed back the Marina Bay project review again," she informed him, hovering in his doorway. "And the board is questioning your sudden interest in our company's health insurance policies for dependents." Robert continued rearranging the furniture. "Tell Singapore I'm handling some personal matters, and inform the board I'm conducting a comprehensive benefits review." "Personal matters," Miranda repeated, her tone making clear how unprecedented this was. In 15 years, Robert had never put anything above business. "Does this have something to do with those little girls Carlson saw you with at the park last weekend?" Robert straightened, fixing her with the steely gaze that had intimidated. "Countless business opponents. Yes, they're my daughters." Miranda's carefully maintained composure slipped. "Daughters? Since when do you have children?" "Since 8 years ago, apparently." He checked his watch. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. Please have security send them up immediately when they arrive." After Miranda left, Robert surveyed the office changes. The corporate minimalism had been softened with colorful pillows and a basket of toys. It looked utterly incongruous, like a corporate daycare center had exploded in one corner of his sleek office. But it was a start. The elevator chimed precisely at noon. Caroline had reluctantly agreed to drop the girls off for their first visit to his workplace, though her expression suggested she was sending them into a lion's den. Sophie bounded in first, all energy and curiosity. "Wow, you can see the whole city from here." She pressed her face against the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Look, Lily, there's the museum." Lily followed more cautiously, surveying the space with Elizabeth's thoughtful gaze. "Is this where you build your buildings?" she asked. "I design them here," Robert explained, "with a team of architects and engineers. Would you like to see some blueprints?" To his surprise, Lily nodded enthusiastically. He spread a building plan across the conference table, lifting her onto a chair so she could see. Her small finger traced the complex lines with unexpected understanding. "It looks like a puzzle," she observed. "That's exactly what it is," Robert agreed, strangely pleased by her perception. While Robert showed Lily the basics of architectural drawings, Sophie explored the office, examining everything with insatiable curiosity. She stopped at his credentials wall, studying the framed degrees and awards. "You went to Harvard," she noted. "Mom went there too. We have her diploma in our apartment." "We met there," Robert confirmed, a memory surfacing of Elizabeth surrounded by textbooks in the library, looking up with that startled smile when he'd asked to share her table. "Are we going to Harvard?" Sophie asked. The question caught Robert off guard, not just its content but the assumption of a future he would be part of. "If that's what you want, you can go anywhere you choose." "Mom started college funds for us," Lily said, still studying the blueprint. "But Aunt Caroline says they're very small still." Robert made a mental note to address this immediately. "Education is important. We'll make sure they grow." The afternoon passed quickly. They ordered pizza, a rarity in Robert's carefully maintained dietary regimen, and he discovered that both girls loved pineapple topping, a preference they'd inherited from Elizabeth, certainly not from him. As they ate, Robert found himself sharing stories about their mother that he hadn't allowed himself to remember in years. How she'd rescued a box of kittens during a rainstorm, her terrible attempts at cooking Italian food, her habit of singing off-key while grading papers. The girls absorbed these stories hungrily, occasionally offering their own. "Mum made us paper cranes when we were sick," Sophie said. "She said they carried wishes." "She taught us to make them too," Lily added, reaching for a sheet of paper from the art table. Her small fingers worked with practiced precision, folding and creasing until a perfect paper crane sat in her palm. "She said you fold 1,000 and your wish comes true." "How many have you made?" Robert asked. 612, both girls answered simultaneously, then giggled at their synchronicity. "What are you wishing for?" The twins exchanged a glance, that silent communication passing between them. "We can't tell," Sophie said, "or it won't come true." When Caroline arrived to collect them, Robert walked the trio to the elevator. "Next Saturday," he confirmed. "I'll pick them up at 9. Caroline nodded stiffly. Their relationship remained tense, but she'd stopped actively blocking his involvement. As the elevator doors began to close, Lily suddenly thrust her hand through the gap, causing them to reopen. She held out the paper crane she'd made. "This is for you," she said shyly. "For your office." Robert accepted the delicate creation, unexpectedly moved. "Thank you." After they left, he placed the crane carefully on his desk, next to the trading screens and financial reports that had defined his existence for so long. The juxtaposition was jarring, and yet somehow right. His phone rang. Marcus Harrington. "I've looked into those trust funds you asked about," his attorney said without preamble. "Elizabeth set them up right after the girls were born. She'd been adding $50 monthly from her teacher's salary." Robert calculated quickly. "That's barely $5,000 each. Less, actually. There were withdrawals, medical expenses for Lily." Robert pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'll transfer $1 million into each account on Monday." "That's not all," Marcus continued, his tone suggesting bad news. "I've been reviewing the non-disclosure agreement from the settlement. There's something you should know." "What is it?" "Elizabeth left a letter with her attorney. Instructions were to deliver it to you only if you ever discovered the twins and sought contact." Robert's grip tightened on the phone. "Have you seen it?" "No. Her attorney is bringing it to my office Monday morning." "Robert." Marcus hesitated. He seemed concerned about its contents. After ending the call, Robert stared at the paper crane, a sense of foreboding settling over him. What final message had Elizabeth left for him, and why did it require him finding the twins first? The crane seemed to watch him with folded paper wings, keeping Elizabeth's secrets tucked within its creases. Monday morning found Robert in Marcus's office, staring at a cream-colored envelope bearing Elizabeth's familiar handwriting. Her attorney, a grey-haired woman named Patricia Reynolds, who had regarded Robert with barely concealed hostility, had delivered it personally, requiring him to sign for it. "I'll give you privacy," Marcus said, closing the door as he left. Robert turned the envelope over in his hands. What could Elizabeth have written that was so important it needed legal handling? Part of him feared opening it, feared whatever accusations. might lie within. He had abandoned her after all, even if he hadn't known about the pregnancy. Finally, he broke the seal and unfolded 3 pages of Elizabeth's distinctive slanted handwriting. "Robert, if you're reading this, you've discovered our daughters. I've thought countless times about contacting you, especially during my darkest days of treatment when I feared what would happen to the girls if I didn't survive. But pride and your final words to me always held me back. First, you should know that Sophie and Lily are unquestionably yours. They have your analytical mind, your determination, and unfortunately, your stubbornness. But they also possess a capacity for joy that reminds me of the man I fell in love with before ambition consumed you. Lily was born with a congenital heart defect. The doctors assure me that with proper care she can lead a normal life, but she'll need ongoing medical attention. I've done my best to provide for this, but my resources are limited. I've swallowed my pride once to accept the settlement your attorney arranged, but only because Lily's needs came before my feelings. I need to tell you something I've never told anyone else. The night before you asked for a divorce, I had planned to tell you about the pregnancy. I had a special dinner prepared, a tiny pair of baby shoes wrapped as a gift. Then you came home and announced you were leaving, that you'd outgrown our marriage and needed freedom to build your empire. I made a choice that night, a choice I've questioned every day since. I chose not to tell you about our children because you had made it abundantly clear that family was not in your vision for the future. Was it the right decision? I don't know. The girls have asked about you, of course. I've never spoken ill of you to them. I've told them their father builds beautiful buildings that touch the sky, and that sometimes people who create such big things can't be contained in small family homes. Now I must ask something difficult of you. If you found the girls and want to be in their lives, you must be all in. They've already lost one parent. They couldn't bear to be abandoned by another. If you can't commit fully, if your empire still comes first, then please step back now, before they form attachments. There's something else you should know. Something I discovered during my treatments. Robert turned the page with mounting dread. The twins have a genetic predisposition to the same heart condition that affects Lily. While Sophie shows no symptoms now, she should be monitored regularly. I've arranged for quarterly checkups, but as the girls grow, they'll need more comprehensive genetic testing. I don't write this to burden you, but because they're your daughters too. They deserve a father who knows them. Their favorite books, anything with horses for Sophie, stars and planets for Lily. Their allergies, strawberries for both. Their fears, thunderstorms, and their dreams. Sophie wants to be a veterinarian. Lily an astronaut. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I've asked Caroline to be their guardian, knowing she'll love them fiercely. But they need more than fierce love, Robert. They need security, opportunity, and a connection to the other half of themselves, the half that comes from you. Whatever you decide, know that I forgave you long ago for leaving. Life is too short for bitterness, a lesson cancer teaches quickly. Our time together gave me our daughters, and for that, I will always be grateful. Elizabeth P.S. There's a storage unit in Cambridge, paid through 2030, Unit 247, at Secure Storage on Western Avenue. The key is with this letter. I've saved everything from their lives, every drawing, every report card, every photograph. If you want to know them, start there. Robert lowered the letter, aware of moisture on his cheeks. A small key had indeed fallen from the envelope, now resting on Marcus's desk. He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. Everything about his daughters' lives, their entire history, stored away in a 10x10 box, while he'd been accumulating wealth and power in gleaming towers above the city. His phone buzzed with an urgent message from his COO about the Singapore project. For the first time in his career, Robert ignored it. "Marcus," he called, opening the office door, "clear my schedule for the rest of the day." His attorney looked up in surprise. The Tokyo investors are waiting on the conference line. Tell them. I had a family emergency. Robert pocketed the storage unit key. It's time I learned who my daughters really are. As Robert drove to Cambridge, his phone continued buzzing with increasingly desperate messages from his executive team. The Robert Blackwood they knew would never disappear during crucial negotiations, but that Robert Blackwood had never held a paper crane made by his daughters' hands, never carried a little girl to safety when she felt dizzy, never read a letter from the woman he'd once loved, revealing a history he'd missed entirely. The storage facility was nondescript, wedged between a laundromat and a convenience store. Unit 247 was in the back corner, its roll-up door showing signs of rust around the edges. When Robert raised the door, the motion-activated light flickered on to reveal shelves of clear plastic bins, each meticulously labeled in Elizabeth's handwriting. First year, preschool, kindergarten, and so on. He opened the nearest container to find carefully preserved baby clothes, 2 of everything, one tagged with an S, one with an L. Beneath these lay hospital bracelets, birth certificates, and a journal titled First 365 Days. In another bin, he found hundreds of photographs, the twins' entire childhood, documented month by month. First steps, first words, first day of school. Elizabeth appeared in many images, growing progressively thinner as the timeline advanced, her smile remaining bright even as her body failed her. Robert sank onto the concrete floor, surrounded by the physical evidence of all he had missed. He opened the journal and began to read Elizabeth's account of their daughter's first year, the sleepless nights, first smiles, the terror when Lily's heart condition was diagnosed. Hours passed as he immersed himself in their history. His phone eventually died, cutting him off from the world that had consumed him for so long. In the deepest bin, labeled simply Elizabeth, he found a USB drive. Using his laptop, he discovered it contained videos, Elizabeth recording messages for the girl's future milestones, high school graduation, college acceptance, wedding days. The final video was titled simply, For Robert If. With trembling fingers, he clicked play. Elizabeth's face filled the screen, gaunt but beautiful, filmed perhaps months before her death. "Hello, Robert," she began, her voice weaker than he remembered, but still rich with warmth. "If you're watching this, you've found our daughters, and the universe has given us all a second chance." As twilight deepened outside the storage unit, Robert Blackwood faced the ghost of his past and the truth that would forever alter his future. Robert sat transfixed as Elizabeth's image filled his laptop screen. Despite her illness-ravaged appearance, her eyes still held that spark of intelligence that had first drawn him to her. "Hello, Robert," her recorded voice began. "If you're watching this, you've found our daughters, and the universe has given us all a second chance." Elizabeth shifted, adjusting the camera angle. "I don't have much time left, and there are things I need you to know, things I couldn't put in a letter." She took a labored breath. "I told you about Lily's heart condition, but what I didn't explain is why I waited so long to accept the settlement. The truth is, I didn't want your money. I wanted you to find us, to come looking. Every time the phone rang during those first few years, I hoped it might be you." Tears welled in Robert's eyes as Elizabeth continued. The girls deserved to know their father. Not the businessman who walks on water, but the man I fell in love with, the one who spent all night building a bookshelf for our first apartment, who brought me soup when I had the flu, who dreamed of changing Boston's skyline. She leaned closer to the camera. "Our daughters are extraordinary, Robert. Sophie has your drive. Nothing stops her once she sets her mind to something. And Lily, despite her physical limitations, has your vision. She sees possibilities where Others see obstacles. Elizabeth's face grew serious. I'm not asking you to change who you are, but I am asking you to remember who you were. The man who believed in something bigger than wealth. The man who wanted to build not just structures, but legacies. She smiled sadly. I've told the girls about that man. I hope they get to meet him someday. The video continued as Elizabeth shared intimate details about the twins. Their birth, first words, the unique ways they communicated with each other, even as infants. They're two halves of one whole, Robert. When Lily was in surgery, Sophie's heart rate dropped at the exact moment they placed her sister under anesthesia, though they were in different rooms. The doctors couldn't explain it. Elizabeth's energy visibly faded as the recording progressed. I'm leaving instructions with Caroline to give you this only if you seek out the girls yourself, because that's the first test, caring enough to find them. She straightened, summoning her remaining strength. The second test will be harder. Can you put something ahead of your ambition? Can you be the father they need, not just the provider? Her final words hit Robert like physical blows. I forgive you for leaving us, Robert. Now you need to forgive yourself, not for my sake, but for theirs. They don't need your guilt or your regrets. They need your presence, your time, your heart. The screen went black. Then Elizabeth appeared one last time, clearly filmed on a different day. She looked worse, her hair gone, wearing a scarf around her head. One last thing, she whispered. The girls have been making paper cranes, 1,000 for a wish. Their wish is for a complete family. She smiled weakly. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Goodbye, Robert. The video ended. Robert sat in the dimly lit storage unit surrounded by the artifacts of his daughters' lives, Elizabeth's final message echoing in his mind. His phone had died hours ago. The world he'd built, the empire that had consumed him, had been trying to reach him all day. Board members, investors, partners, all demanding his attention. For the first time, Robert Blackwood didn't care. He packed several photo albums and the twins' baby journals into his car. As he locked the storage unit, he made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month ago. It was time to bring his daughters home. You can't be serious, Caroline said, her voice rising as she paced Robert's penthouse living room. You've known them for a few weeks, and now you want them to live here? Robert gestured around the spacious apartment. I've converted the guest wing into bedrooms for them. They'll each have their own space, plus a shared playroom. This isn't about square footage, Robert. It's about stability. Their entire lives have been in our apartment, which is why I'm proposing a gradual transition, he countered. Weekends here at first, then perhaps alternating weeks. Caroline crossed her arms. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When board meetings and international deals start? Calling again? Children aren't projects you can delegate when things get busy. The accusation stung because it struck at Robert's deepest fear, that he would fail his daughters as he had failed Elizabeth. I've already restructured the company, he said quietly. I've promoted Jenkins to acting CEO. I'm stepping back to chairman. Caroline's eyes widened. You're giving up control of Blackwood Developments. Not giving up. Redistributing. Robert poured them both coffee. I've spent 20 years building an empire. Now I need to build something more important. Caroline studied him skeptically. Elizabeth always said there was a different Robert beneath the ambition. I never believed her. Neither did I, he admitted, but she left me a message, a challenge, really. And the girls are part of that challenge. They're not a challenge, Caroline. They're my daughters. He met her gaze directly. I've missed 8 years. I won't miss any more. Their conversation was interrupted by Robert's attorney arriving with guardianship paperwork. Marcus had prepared a proposal that would establish joint custody while maintaining Caroline's legal guardianship status. "This recognizes your position as their appointed guardian," Marcus explained to Caroline, while giving Robert parental rights and responsibilities. Caroline reviewed the documents carefully. "You're establishing trust funds for both girls? With medical provisions?" Robert nodded. "Comprehensive coverage for Lily's condition and preventative monitoring for Sophie, plus educational trusts, living expenses, everything they might need. And if you decide this is too much responsibility, after 6 months, the trusts are irrevocable," Marcus assured her. "The girl's financial security is guaranteed, regardless of any future arrangements." Caroline's expression remained guarded, but Robert could see her weighing her options. The apartment they shared was becoming cramped for growing girls. Their school district was adequate but not exceptional, and despite her dedication, Caroline had been stretched thin since Elizabeth's death, working extra shifts at the hospital while raising her nieces. "I need to discuss this with the girls," she said finally. "They're old enough to have input on where they live." "Of course," Robert agreed, "but there's something else we need to discuss first. Something about Sophie." Caroline tensed. "What? About Sophie?" Elizabeth's letter mentioned that both girls have a genetic predisposition to heart conditions. "Sophie needs comprehensive testing." The color drained from Caroline's face. "But Sophie's never shown any symptoms." "Neither do many people with atrial septal defects until complications develop," Robert said gently. "I've arranged for appointments at Boston Children's Hospital. The best cardiologists, geneticists, using your connections to jump the waiting list," Caroline finished bitterly. "Yes," Robert acknowledged without apology. "For both girls." Something shifted in Caroline's expression, a reluctant recognition that despite her reservations about Robert's sudden involvement, his resources could provide opportunities for the twins she simply couldn't match. "Elizabeth would have approved," she conceded quietly. "She always said Sophie was the one to worry about." "What do you mean?" Caroline sighed. "Lily's condition was diagnosed early. We've monitored it constantly. But Sophie, she's always been the strong one, the protector. She hides her struggles." Robert recalled Sophie watching attentively when Lily grew tired at the museum, the way she hovered when her sister needed assistance. "She takes care of Lily." "They take care of each other," Caroline corrected. "But yes, Sophie shoulders more than a child should, just like her mother did." The comparison to Elizabeth struck Robert deeply. How many burdens had Elizabeth carried alone while he pursued his ambitions? Before he could respond, his phone rang. Sophie's weekly piano recital was starting in 30 minutes. Another change in his carefully structured life, standing appointments for school events, doctor visits, and weekend activities. As they gathered their things, Caroline paused at the door. "You know what really surprised Elizabeth about your divorce?" Robert waited, bracing himself. "That you never once asked about her dreams, her plans. She said you two built your life around your ambitions, and she kept waiting for you to ask about hers." Caroline's expression softened slightly. "Don't make the same mistake with your daughters, Robert. Ask them about their dreams, then help them build them." The pediatric cardiology floor at Boston Children's Hospital featured brightly colored walls and interactive displays designed to distract young patients, but nothing could alleviate the tension as Robert and Caroline sat in the waiting area, while both twins underwent comprehensive testing. "It's just precautionary for Sophie," Dr. Bennett had assured them, "but with Lily's history and the genetic component, we want a complete picture." 3 hours had passed and Robert had abandoned any pretense of working on his tablet. Caroline had already worn a path in the carpet with her pacing. "Family of Blackwood?" A nurse called, finally. They were led to a consultation room where Dr. Bennett waited with digital images displayed on a large screen. The distinguished cardiologist's expression revealed nothing as he invited them to sit. "Let's start with Lily," he began. "Her condition remains stable. The previous surgery created a good patch closure, but as we've discussed, she'll need another procedure as she grows." Caroline nodded. This wasn't new information. "What's changed," Dr. Bennett continued, "is our timeline. With the resources now available," he nodded to Robert, "we can schedule a minimally invasive procedure before any complications develop. This proactive approach significantly improves her long-term prognosis." "And Sophie?" Robert asked, unable to wait any longer. Dr. Bennett shifted to different images on the screen. "Sophie shows early signs of the same condition, though much less pronounced than her sisters." The world seemed to tilt beneath Robert, both daughters affected. "The good news," the doctor continued, "is that we've caught it extraordinarily early. At this stage, it's monitoring only, with no immediate intervention required." "But eventually," Caroline pressed. "Eventually, yes, she'll likely need a procedure similar to Lily's, but we have time to prepare, both medically and emotionally." As Dr. Bennett outlined the treatment plans, Robert found himself staring at the cardiac images of his daughter's hearts, so small, so vulnerable, yet so strong, like Elizabeth had been. When the doctor finished, Robert asked, "When should we tell them about Sophie's condition?" "Children are remarkably resilient," Dr. Bennett advised. "In my experience, honesty delivered with confidence and hope works best. They'll take their emotional cues from you." After the consultation, they found the twins in the children's playroom, making paper cranes from the hospital's origami paper supply. They had taught several other young patients their technique, and a small flock of colorful birds now decorated the play area. 8 more today," Sophie announced proudly. "That's 643 total. Getting closer to 1,000, Lily added, carefully creasing a blue square. Robert and Caroline exchanged glances, silently debating who should speak. Finally, Robert knelt beside the craft table. "Girls, Dr. Bennett has given us some news." He began carefully. "Lily, your heart is doing well, and we're going to schedule a special procedure to make it even stronger." Lily nodded solemnly. "Will it hurt?" "The doctors will make sure you're comfortable," Robert assured her. "And you'll recover faster than last time." Sophie watched her sister with protective concern, then asked, "Can I stay with her at the hospital?" "That's the other thing we need to discuss," Robert said gently. "The doctors found that your heart might need some special care too, Sophie." Sophie's eyes widened. "Like Lily's. Similar but much smaller. Right now, we just need to keep an eye on it." The twins immediately reached for each other's hands, their inherent connection visibly strengthening. "So we both have special hearts?" Lily asked. "Yes," Caroline confirmed, joining them at the table. "You're twins, after all." To the adults' surprise, the girls seemed almost relieved by this shared diagnosis. The burden of difference between them, Lily's fragility versus Sophie's strength, had been subtly equalizing their relationship from the beginning. "Does this mean we'll both make the Olympic swimming team or neither of us?" Sophie asked practically. Robert couldn't help but smile at her pragmatism. "It means you'll both have amazing lives, just with regular checkups." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Lily tugged on Robert's sleeve. "Dad?" She still spoke the word hesitantly, testing its feel. "If we both have special hearts, does that mean you do too?" The question caught Robert off guard. "I've never had my heart checked that way," he admitted. "Mom said we get our hearts from you," Sophie interjected. "She said you had the biggest heart of anyone she knew, but you kept it hidden in a vault like treasure." Robert's throat tightened. Even after everything, Elizabeth had spoken well of him to their daughters. "Your mother was very wise," he managed, "and very forgiving." "She said that too," Lily nodded. "That forgiveness makes your heart bigger, not smaller." On the drive home, with the twins dozing in the back seat, Caroline broke their companionable silence. "You're scheduling genetic testing. For yourself, I assume." Robert nodded. "Already done. Results next week." "Good," she said simply. They had reached an unspoken truce in the hospital waiting room, their shared concern for the girls transcending past grievances. Not friendship exactly, but a partnership of necessity. "I'm thinking about selling the penthouse," Robert said unexpectedly. "Looking for a real home. Something with a yard close to their school." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Suburban life? You?" "People change. Some people," she allowed, "when properly motivated." In the rearview mirror, Robert could see Sophie's head resting on Lily's shoulder, their matching faces peaceful in sleep. His motivation rested there, heart conditions and all. The September sun filtered through the trees at Boston Common as Robert watched his daughters feed the ducks. 3 months had passed since their first meeting at Elizabeth's grave, 3 months of weekends that had expanded to include Wednesday dinners and school pickup on Mondays. Robert checked his watch. 30 minutes until they needed to head to Lily's pre-operation appointment. The procedure was scheduled for tomorrow morning, a minimally invasive cardiac catheterization that would repair her atrial septal defect using a specialized closure. Device. His own genetic testing had confirmed what he'd already suspected. The heart condition had come from his side of the family. His father had died of a weak heart at 58, though the rural doctors of Robert's childhood had never identified the specific defect. "Dad, look," Sophie called, pointing to a particularly bold mallard that had waddled up to take bread directly from Lily's hand. "Dad." Both girls used the word now without hesitation. It still created a tightness in Robert's chest each time he heard it. His phone vibrated in his pocket, the third call from his office that morning. Unlike before, he let it go to voicemail. Jenkins was handling the Singapore crisis adequately, even if the board was nervous about Robert's continued absence from key negotiations. Caroline joined him on the bench, having returned from her hospital shift. They had developed an amicable co-parenting routine, their mutual devotion to the twins overriding their complicated history. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked. "Terrified," Robert admitted. "You?" "It's easier the second time. The first surgery, when she was 2, that was the worst. Elizabeth was already sick herself, trying to be strong for Lily." Robert swallowed hard. Another critical moment in his daughters' lives that he had missed. "She would have liked this, you know," Caroline said unexpectedly, watching the twins. "Elizabeth, seeing you with them." Before Robert could respond, his phone vibrated again. This time, he checked the caller ID, Marcus Harrington. His attorney never called unless it was urgent. "I should take this," he apologized, stepping away. "Robert, we have a problem," Marcus began without preamble. "The board is moving to invoke the contingency clause." "What contingency clause?" "Section 12 of the company charter. If the CEO is absent or incapacitated for more than 90 days, the board can vote to permanently replace him." "That's absurd. I'm not incapacitated. I've been working remotely." "Not enough, according to Davidson's faction. They've called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., the exact time of Lily's procedure." "Postpone it," Robert ordered. "I've tried." "They're within their rights, Robert. You need to be there, or you could lose control of Blackwood Developments entirely." After ending the call, Robert returned to the bench, his expression troubled. "Bad news?" Caroline asked. "Board politics," he replied vaguely. "Nothing important." But as they gathered the twins for the hospital appointment, Robert's mind raced with contingencies. He had built Blackwood Developments from nothing. 20 years of 16-hour days, sacrificed relationships, single-minded focus. It was his legacy, a legacy he had once thought he was building alone, unaware of the two little girls who carried his DNA, his name, even his heart defect. At the hospital, Dr. Bennett reviewed the procedure one final time. "We'll begin at 9. Tomorrow. Lily will need to arrive by 7 for prep." "I'll be there," Robert assured them, still uncertain how he would manage both commitments. That evening at Caroline's apartment, the twins were unusually quiet as they folded paper cranes. At the kitchen table, 812, Sophie announced, adding another to their collection. "Almost there," Lily said, though her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. Robert sat beside them. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Lily nodded. "A little." "That's normal," he assured her. "But Dr. Bennett is the best, and I'll be right there when you wake up." Sophie looked up sharply. "Promise?" The intensity of her gaze reminded Robert of Elizabeth during their final argument, demanding truth when he'd offered platitudes. "I promise," he said firmly, pushing thoughts of the board meeting aside. Some choices were becoming increasingly clear. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Caroline handed Robert a cup of tea. "You should go home, get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Actually, there's something I need to tell you," he began, then explained the board situation. Caroline's expression hardened. "So, you have to choose. Your company, or your daughter's surgery." "There's no choice to make," Robert insisted. "I'll be at the hospital, but I may lose control of the company I've spent my life building." Caroline studied him thoughtfully. The old Robert wouldn't have hesitated. He'd have gone to that board meeting. "I'm not that man anymore." "No," she agreed, "you're not." As Robert prepared to leave, he checked on the twins one last time. They shared a bedroom in the small apartment, their twin beds pushed close together. Even in sleep, they maintained their connection. Lily's hand outstretched towards Sophie. Sophie turned protectively toward her sister. On their shared nightstand sat a small mountain of paper cranes, nearly enough to grant a wish. Robert suddenly understood why the twins had been so quiet that evening. Tomorrow wasn't just a medical procedure, it was a test of the fragile trust they had begun to place in him. Elizabeth's words from the video echoed in his mind. "Can you put something ahead of your ambition? Can you be the father they need, not just the provider?" As Robert drove back to the penthouse he would soon be selling, his decision solidified. There would be other companies, other buildings, other deals, but he had only one chance to be there when Lily opened her eyes. Lily's hospital room was decorated with paper cranes hanging from the ceiling, perched on windowsills, clustered on bedside tables. The nurses had helped Sophie hang them while Lily was in pre-op, transforming the sterile space into a colorful aviary. 947, Sophie counted, hanging another. "We're getting close." Caroline checked her, watched nervously. Robert should be here by now. It was 8:45 a.m. Lily had already been taken to the surgical prep area, brave but frightened, asking repeatedly if her father would arrive before they took her to the operating room. "Traffic, probably," Caroline said, not mentioning the board. Meeting scheduled for the same time. She had spent a sleepless night wondering if Elizabeth had been wrong about Robert's capacity for change. At 8:52, the door opened. But instead of Robert, Marcus Harrington entered, looking uncomfortable in the pediatric ward. "Ms. Wright, I'm Robert's attorney." Caroline's heart sank. "He sent his lawyer to explain why he couldn't be here?" "No," Marcus clarified quickly. "He sent me to deliver these From his briefcase, he produced a folder of legal documents and a sealed envelope. The papers transfer 40% of Blackwood Developments into trust funds for Sophie and Lily. The letter is for them when they're older. Caroline accepted the items mechanically. Where is Robert? In the boardroom, I imagine. The meeting started at 9, so he had chosen the company after all. Caroline closed her eyes, dreading having to explain to the twins why their father had broken his promise. "Aunt Caroline," Sophie called suddenly from the window. "Look!" Caroline joined her at the window, which overlooked the hospital's main entrance. A commotion was unfolding below. A crowd of reporters and photographers surrounding a familiar figure sprinting toward the entrance. "Robert, he's on his way up," Marcus confirmed, checking his phone. He wanted the paperwork delivered regardless of today's outcome. 5 minutes later, Robert burst into the room, slightly breathless and missing his usual suit jacket. His tie was askew, his normally immaculate hair wind-blown. "Am I too late?" he asked urgently. "They haven't taken her in yet," Caroline replied, relief evident in her voice. "But the board meeting can proceed without me," Robert finished. "I made my statement and left." "What statement?" "That my daughter's health comes before any company matters, and any board that doesn't understand that priority isn't a board I wish to serve on." Marcus looked pained. It was quite dramatic. He literally dropped his resignation letter on the table and walked out while Davidson was mid-sentence. "You resigned?" Caroline asked incredulously. "I gave them an ultimatum," Robert clarified. "Either they accept my new priorities and working arrangement, or they can buy me out at market value." Before Caroline could respond, a nurse appeared. "We're ready for family to see Lily before the procedure." Sophie immediately grabbed Robert's hand. "Come on, Dad, Lily's waiting." As they followed the nurse, Caroline touched Robert's arm. "You chose them over the company." "Not even a choice," he replied simply. In the pre-op area, Lily lay small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, an IV already in her arm. Her face brightened when she saw them. "You came," she exclaimed as Robert approached. "I promised, didn't I?" He smoothed her hair gently. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Scared," she admitted, "but Sophie hung all our cranes in my room, for luck." "We're at 952 now," Sophie informed them. "Just 48 more for our wish." Dr. Bennett joined them, reviewing the procedure one final time before they would take Lily to the operating room. "Any questions before we begin?" Lily looked up at Robert. "Will you make cranes with Sophie while you wait, so we can reach 1,000 today?" "Of course," Robert promised, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "What are you wishing for anyway? You can tell me now. It's almost complete." The twins exchanged a glance, their silent communication passing between them. "We can't tell," Sophie said, "but we think it's already coming true." As the surgical team prepared to move Lily, Robert held her hand. "I'll be right here when you wake up." "I know," Lily said with surprising certainty. In the waiting area, Robert and Sophie folded cranes from the origami paper Caroline had brought. His corporate-trained fingers were surprisingly adept at the precise folds, though Sophie still corrected his technique occasionally. 975, Sophie counted after an hour. 25 more. Caroline watched them work, side by side, their heads bent in concentration, Sophie's blonde hair matching the shade Robert's had been before it silvered at the temples. "You really resigned?" she asked quietly, while Sophie was distracted by a nurse bringing juice. "Restructured," Robert clarified. "I'll remain as chairman, but Jenkins will continue as CEO. I'll consult on major projects, but no more 16-hour days or international travel. Elizabeth would be proud, Caroline said, surprising herself with the admission. Robert's hands stilled on the half-folded paper. I hope so. I'm trying to be the man she believed I could be. 999, Sophie announced, triumphantly 2 hours later. Just one more, Dad. You do the last one. Robert selected a piece of gold paper and began folding with deliberate care. As he made the final crease, Dr. Bennett appeared in the waiting room doorway, still in surgical scrubs. Robert froze, the completed crane in his palm. The procedure went perfectly, the doctor announced with a smile. Lily is in recovery and asking for her family, Sophie cheered, then grabbed the golden crane from Robert's hand. We did it! 1,000 cranes, right when Dr. Bennett came out. Our wish came true. Which was, Caroline prompted. Sophie's expression grew serious. For us to be a real family, all of us. Robert knelt to her level, his own eyes suspiciously bright. That's what I wish for too. Together they followed Dr. Bennett to the recovery area, where Lily was waking groggily from anesthesia. When she saw them, a drowsy smile spread across her face. Did we make it? She whispered. 1,000! Sophie placed the golden crane in her sister's hand. 1,000. Exactly. Dad made the last one. Lily's fingers closed around the paper bird. Then we're really a family now. We always were, Robert said softly. I just took a while to find my way home. As Lily drifted back to sleep, the golden crane clutched in her hand. Robert realized the wish had indeed been granted, not by paper birds, but by choices, promises kept, and priorities finally set right. Outside the hospital window, the Boston skyline stretched toward the clouds, buildings he had designed, deals he had closed, the empire he had sacrificed everything to build. It all seemed strangely distant now, overshadowed by the paper cranes and the silent promise they represented. Some dreams, Robert was learning, were worth giving up. Others, the ones he'd never dared to dream, were worth everything 1 year. Later, golden autumn leaves swirled around Oakwood Cemetery as 3 figures approached Elizabeth's grave. Robert carried a bouquet of white roses, honest flowers, as Elizabeth had called them. Sophie and Lily each held paper cranes, meticulously folded from shimmering gold paper. Hard to believe it's been a year since we first met here, Robert said, placing the roses against the headstone. So much had changed since that chance encounter. The girls, now 9, had grown an inch taller. Lily's cheeks showed healthy color that had been absent before her successful surgery. Both girls wore matching lockets containing tiny photographs of their mother. Do you think Mum can see us? Sophie asked, arranging her crane beside the flowers. I believe she can, Robert answered, no longer uncomfortable with such questions. The past year had taught him that parenting required honesty, even about the hardest topics. Lily placed her crane next to her sister's. I think she sent you to find us, she said, with the simple conviction of a child. That was her real wish. With all those paper cranes, Robert smiled, though his eyes glistened. Your mother was always better at planning ahead than I was. After a quiet moment of remembrance, they walked back through the cemetery toward their home, not Robert's former penthouse, but a Victorian house in Cambridge, just blocks from where he and Elizabeth had lived as newlyweds. The girls attended a nearby school where Elizabeth had once taught, and several of the teachers still remembered her. Caroline joined them for Sunday dinners each week. The tension between her and Robert had gradually dissolved into mutual respect, their shared love for the twins creating an unexpected friendship. As they approached the house, Sophie raced ahead to check on the treehouse Robert had built over. The summer, his first physical construction project in decades. The corporate titan who once delegated even the simplest household tasks had discovered unexpected satisfaction in creating something with his own hands. "Dad," Lily said, walking beside him at a more measured pace. "Miss Peterson asked us to bring family photos for our heritage project. We have plenty in the albums from the storage unit," Robert replied. Lily hesitated. "But there aren't any with all four of us. You, me, Sophie, and Mom." The observation struck Robert with unexpected force. Of course there weren't. He had left Elizabeth before learning of her pregnancy. "I have an idea," he said. "Let's stop by the studio tomorrow. We can take a current photo of the three of us and then have them digitally add your mother from one of her pictures." Lily's face brightened. "Can we put it on the mantel with the others?" "Front and center," Robert promised. Inside their home, evidence of their blended life was everywhere. Sophie's soccer trophies beside Lily's piano competition, medals, Elizabeth's books sharing shelves with Robert's architectural volumes, framed drawings of buildings the girls had designed with their father's guidance. Robert's phone rang. Unlike in the past, he checked the caller ID before deciding whether to answer. Work calls went to voicemail outside of his designated hours, a boundary that had shocked his executive team initially, but which they had gradually accepted. "It's Jenkins," he told the girls. "I should take this. Dinner in 30 minutes. As he discussed the Singapore project, now finally nearing completion under Jenkins' leadership, Robert watched through the window as Sophie helped Lily climb the treehouse ladder. They had developed a system, Sophie climbing ahead, then bracing, to give Lily extra support when needed. The girl's cardiologist had reported excellent progress for both of them. Lily's repaired heart was functioning normally, and Sophie's condition remained stable, requiring monitoring but no intervention yet. Their genetic predisposition would always require vigilance, but the prognosis was excellent. After ending the call, Robert joined the twins in the backyard. "Jenkins sends his regards. The Singapore Tower topped out today." "Is it really the third tallest in Asia?" Sophie asked, dangling her legs from the treehouse platform. "Second tallest now. And you two will be at the ribbon cutting next spring," Robert replied. The trip would be their first international journey together, a milestone he once couldn't have imagined prioritizing over business concerns. Later that evening, after bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, Robert retreated to his home office. Unlike his former corporate headquarters, this space featured children's artwork, alongside architectural awards and family photos next to business portfolios. He opened his desk drawer and removed Elizabeth's final letter, which he reread periodically as a reminder of his promise. The paper had softened with handling, the creases deepening like the lines time had etched around his eyes. A soft knock interrupted his reflection. Sophie stood in the doorway in her pajamas. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head, climbing onto his lap as she sometimes did when troubled. At 9, she was reaching an age where such gestures would soon become less frequent, and Robert treasured each one. "I was thinking about Mom," she admitted. "Sometimes I worry I'm forgetting her voice." Robert reached for his tablet and opened a folder labeled Elizabeth. From it, he selected one of the videos from the storage unit. Elizabeth reading a bedtime story. Her voice animated as she created different characters. Together they watched, Sophie nestled against her father's chest, occasionally mouthing the familiar words along with her mother's recorded voice. "You know," Robert said when the video ended, "your mother was the bravest person I've ever known." "Braver than you?" "Much braver. I spent years afraid of the things that really matter." Sophie considered this. "Like love?" "Exactly like love," Robert agreed, impressed by her perception. "I was afraid of how much I loved your mother, afraid of what becoming a father might mean. "But you're not afraid anymore," Sophie stated with certainty. "Not of the important things," he confirmed. After Sophie returned to bed, Robert stood at his office window, gazing at the Boston skyline in the distance. His building still stood among the city's tallest, monuments to the man he had once been, but his true legacy sat within these walls. 2 little girls who had taught him what Elizabeth had always known, that love wasn't something to fear, but something to build your life around. On his desk sat a golden paper crane, the 1,000th one which Lily had clutched throughout her recovery. Beside it lay the plans for his newest project, a children's cardiac wing at Boston Medical Center, funded by the Robert and Elizabeth Blackwood Foundation and named in Elizabeth's memory. The crane seemed to glow in the dim light, its paper wings poised as if ready for flight. 1,000 folded cranes hadn't granted a magical wish, but they had created something more valuable. A path that led Robert back to the family he nearly missed, and forward to the father he was meant to become. As circus he prepared for bed, Robert paused at the girls' doorway, watching their peaceful sleep. In Sophie's protective posture and Lily's gentle smile, he saw glimpses of Elizabeth, reminders that she remained present in the most important parts of his life. "You were right, Elizabeth," he whispered to the quiet room. "Sometimes the universe does work in mysterious ways." The autumn wind rustled the leaves outside, carrying his words into the night. And somewhere, perhaps, Elizabeth heard him at last.